Arcadian Vanguard presents The Wrestling News in your daily wrestling newscast for Wednesday, October 19th, 2022. Good morning, I'm Mike Sempervive. We begin with news on Hangman Adam Page, who suffered a concussion last night on AEW Dynamite, live on TBS from the Heritage Bank Center in Cincinnati. The injury occurred during the main event, in which Page was challenging Jon Moxley for the AEW World title. Page took a lariat clothesline from Moxley and crumpled to the mat, at which point referee Paul Turner conferred with him and immediately called for ringside physician Dr. Michael J. Sampson in addition to other medical personnel. Page, real name Stephen Woltz, was carefully taken from the ring on a stretcher after attendants removed the bottom ring rope. The match was stopped, with Turner awarding the decision to Moxley. Woltz was attended to backstage and then taken to a Cincinnati trauma center, according to a medical update from AEW. The statement also indicated that he has since been discharged, but remains under AEW's concussion protocol. We will keep you posted as more details become available. With the main event having ended abruptly and unexpectedly, the closing moments of the show featured what appeared to be an impromptu confrontation between Moxley and MJF, in which MJF revealed that he would be cashing in his Casino Battle Royal poker chip for a world title match with Moxley at AEW's Full Gear pay-per-view on Saturday, November 19th from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey.
Here's what's gonna go down. I'm gonna cash that chip in, but when I do, I don't want you at 50%. I don't want you right after a match. I want you 110%. I don't want any excuses. I want to make sure that when I beat you clean, smack dab in the middle of the ring, that there's not a goddamn question that I'm better than you, and you know it. I'm cashing my chip in full gear.
Wow. MJF and Moxley's Blackpool Combat Club leader William Regal got into a verbal altercation on the show last night. Tony Schiavone was in the ring to interview Regal when MJF's music hit. MJF proceeded to cut an emotional promo on Regal about the ramifications of a tryout match he had with WWE as he started his career with New York's Creative Pro Wrestling, and the psychological effects that Regal's words would have on him in a later follow-up email.
Do not reply to this, but how would this make me say, oh, I know, let's hire Max. Make a name for yourself in the wrestling world and you'll get noticed. That means being a high-level performer. When you do, trust me, I'll know. Unfortunately for you, the game has changed. The WWE exclusively hires the best talent in the world to the top world-class athletes. When you're one of them, then maybe send me your stuff. Yours sincerely, William Regal. That's the email you sent to a 19-year-old kid, a child with a dream, and you squandered it!
MJF began to storm off when Regal made his retort, speaking about his own history and running down MJF for taking shortcuts and saying he still has a lot to prove.
Max, don't take any shortcuts. You want to be a real bad guy? You want to be the devil? Then make a name for yourself by doing it right. Beat everybody that stands in front of you, and I don't care what liberties you take with competitors. Just get to that place.
And before we move on with the rest of AEW's television show last night, on this morning's Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer has confirmed that producer and agent Ace Steel was released by the company on Tuesday. Steel was one of the people involved in the all-out pay-per-view fight that took place during the post-show press conference in September, which also included CM Punk, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega. We continue to cover the story, and we'll have more information on this situation as it becomes available. In addition to the AEW World Title main event, last night's episode of Dynamite, called Title Tuesday, featured 3 other championship matches. Ring of Honor World Champion Chris Jericho defeated former champion Dalton Castle by pinfall following the Judas Effect. The Death Triangle team of the Lucha Brothers and Pac beat the Best Friends team of Trent Beretta, Chuck Taylor, and All-Atlantic champion Orange Cassidy to retain the World Trios title when Rey Fenix pinned Beretta. And Toni Storm successfully defended the interim women's title against Hikaru Shida. Storm was jumped after the match by Jamie Hayter, Rebel, and Britt Baker. Coming to her aid were Saraya, as well as Riho, the inaugural AEW Women's Champion, who had not been seen in AEW since last May. Due to TBS carrying Game 1 of the American League Championship Series between the New York Yankees and Houston Astros tonight, AEW Dynamite ran in direct competition to WWE's NXT on USA Network last night for the first time in 18 months. The go-home episode of NXT leading into next Saturday's Halloween Havoc was highlighted by several appearances from main roster WWE talent. The show closed with a special NXT edition of the KO show hosted by Kevin Owens, whose guests were NXT champion Braun Breaker, JD McDonough, and Ilya Dragunov, who will face off Saturday night in a triple threat for the NXT title. The three men brawled in the ring at the conclusion of the segment, and Money in the Bank winner Austin Theory appeared on the ramp, holding his Money in the Bank briefcase in the air to end the show, and appearing to hint that he planned to cash it in for a shot at the NXT title. Raw's Rhea Ripley made her NXT return to defeat Roxanne Perez, and SmackDown's Raquel Rodriguez was disqualified in her match against Cora Jade for using a kendo stick on her opponent. Both matches were billed as Pick Your Poison, in which Jade and Perez, who will face off at Halloween Havoc, got to pick their rival's opponent for the night. In other results, SmackDown's Shinsuke Nakamura, former NXT champion, made a surprise return to the Black and Gold brand to defeat Channing Stacks Lorenzo. Cameron Grimes teamed with Raw's The OC to defeat The Schism. Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams defeated Wesley and Oro Mensah, and Alba Fire defeated SmackDown's Sonya Deville. In more AEW news, here's the Wrestling News' Lou Kipilman.
Chris Jericho has signed a new contract with the company that extends through 2025, according to Tony Khan. Variety also reported that in addition to the extension, Jericho will be taking on greater responsibilities in AEW behind the scenes, serving as a producer and creative advisor, and continuing to mentor young talent. Said Khan to Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated, quote, "I'm a huge fan of Chris Jericho. I followed his career for over 27 years, and I believe he's putting forth one of the greatest years of his career this year. He is one of the biggest stars in pro wrestling, and he is incredibly valuable for AEW." End quote. Jericho has been with the company since 2019, and was the first major star announced following the initial group of executive vice presidents at the time, Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, and Nick and Matt Jackson of the Young Bucks. He was also the first AEW World Champion. Jericho's re-signing comes shortly after the announcement last week of Jon Moxley's contract renewal and increased behind-the-scenes role. For the Wrestling News, I'm Lou Kipilman.
In ratings news, WWE Monday Night Raw held relatively steady this week, with last Monday's show live on the USA Network from the Paycom Center in Oklahoma City, drawing an average of 1.804 million viewers, on par with the 1.824 million from last week, according to Showbuzz Daily. In hourly breakdowns, the first hour of the show did 1.941 million, the second hour dropped to 1.852 million, and the third and final hour grew to 1.618 million. The key 18 to 49-year-old demographic was slightly down, falling from 0.55 last week to 0.50 this week, translating to 648,000 viewers according to WrestleNomics. The episode came in at number 5 for the night on cable TV in the target demo, equal to last week's position. The Monday Night Football game on ESPN between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Denver Broncos won the night on cable in both the target demo and in overall viewership. The audience for Raw was up 13.25% from the same week in 2021 and up 28.2% in the key demographic. And before we leave you today, we'd like to remind you that however you consume your content, you can find the Wrestling News 24 hours a day and 7 days a week across social media. On Twitter, follow us at Wrestling News AV. Our Facebook page is also Wrestling News AV. The Wrestling News can also be found on the Arcadian Vanguard YouTube page. And for those who utilize Amazon Echo devices, just tell Alexa to play the Wrestling News podcast. And remember to make sure you add podcast at the end. Once again, for daily updates, breaking news, and more, follow the Wrestling News across social media. And that's the news for today. If anything happens, we will be here to tell you about it. No clickbait, no paywall, just the wrestling news. The Wrestling News is a division of Arcadian Vanguard, and the Wrestling Newscast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network.